Good morning. I wrote a super sensible sermon last night. I realized at 6:15 in the morning that the sermon had suddenly taken a different direction. Unfortunately, the floor was lava, and there were monsters under the bed, a couple of them, and another monster who wasn't even bothering to hide under the bed anymore. When you title it 6 Impossible Things Before Breakfast, you should probably start preaching before you get out of bed, before you've had breakfast, when your mind is in that flexible state where it's easy to imagine 6 impossible things, like preaching in your pajamas. So here we begin our January theme of imagination. What does it mean to be a people of imagination? How does imagination play into our lives as people of faith? What even is imagination? Imagination is the ability to take two things that are seemingly unrelated, images of them, we might not even see them present, and imagine bringing them together to create something new. Imagination is certainly amoral. It's not good or bad in itself. We can imagine things that are useful, that are life-giving, that are beautiful, and we can imagine things that are destructive and dangerous and deathly. Humans are quite good at that. So, as a person of faith, how do I discern when I'm suffering from a lack of imagination or from hubris? I think that's the greatest danger with imagination, is imagining that our bad idea will be helpful, that our dangerous idea is safe, that our transformative idea will only change things for the better. When I was a middle-aged child, about 8 or 9 years old, my father brought home the 1969 short documentary Oscar-winning movie, Why Man Creates. And it told the history of humankind through animation. And there's a little segment that I'll share with you that became a family favorite and a seed in my imagination, I think. Here it is.
Hey, what are you doing? I'm painting the ceiling. What are you doing? I'm painting the floor.
Darwin says man is an animal.
Rot. Man is not an animal.
Animal.
Man
isn't.
And he's an animal.
Shall we start from the beginning?
I'm a bug, I'm a germ, I'm a bug, I'm a... Louis Pasteur. I'm not a bug, I'm not a germ, I'm not a bug.
So I'm a bug, I'm a germ became a family joke. And in watching this movie again, as I prepared for this sermon, I saw that one of the fundamental questions or tensions in the space between or among religion and imagination was in this movie, a seed planted 50 years ago. Here's that.
Have you ever thought that radical ideas threaten institutions, then become institutions, and in turn reject radical ideas which threaten institutions?
No.
Gee, for a minute I thought I had something.
Okay, let me say that again slowly. Have you ever thought that radical ideas threaten institutions and then become institutions and in turn reject radical ideas which threaten institutions? That sounds like liberal religion to me. And the ever evolving ideas about what is good and true and right. And it requires both a vivid imagination to be able to come up with those radical ideas and a lightness of attachment or grip, so that you don't become that hardened institution that rejects radical ideas that threaten whatever the current status quo might be. When our imagination can see an injustice and imagine something better and work to transform it, that is religious imagination at its very best. Okay, there you are. This is my friend, the Reverend Nell Newton, who is the minister of the
Amarillo Unitarian Universalist Fellowship in the panhandle of Texas, where a lot of people can't even imagine that there would be Unitarian Universalists.
And yet there you are with your congregation. So, and you're using Soul Matter, so you're also, your congregation is also considering imagination and how imagination serves us, how possibly imagination can get in our way as anxiety. As I lay in bed this morning, so excited about the impossible ideas I was having, filming myself from, waking up. There's another person who's near and dear to my heart who was waking up, a young adult who is despairing and who is imagining a world that is crashing down, a world that is hardly worth living in because of the amount of suffering and evil and cruelty and just human failure that he sees. So I thought about, our ability to imagine the worst. And we're good at that also. And for me, I feel that where my faith and my imagination need to meet is in a place of sacred hope, of believing still in something impossible happening. So many impossible things have happened since I was born almost 60 years ago. We put a man on the moon. Nobody had a personal computer, never mind a teeny tiny computer that you walked around with in your hand. For us to be talking and recording and having church on video, that was science fiction. That was the Jetsons cartoon that I watched. And here we are. The trick is always trying to judge whether those things we imagine are actually improving the world or whether they might, in fact, be causing harm. And we don't always know. And I think in the Time for All Ages story, what we saw with the little girl and her blank piece of paper and her being frozen was a fear of failing, a fear of trying an idea and having it not work out.
That is part of white supremacy culture that says if you can't be perfect, you really shouldn't even try. But I know that you and I both had to read a book in seminary by our professor Sharon Welch about an ethic of risk. And her major message is that you need to try. You need to try over and over. And you need to get used to the fact that you're going to probably make some mistakes and you're going to learn a lot. And it's just going to, and you're going to hit the wrong note, but you always try and then you stop and you try, you review and then you try again and you do it over and over again. That's what she calls an ethic of risk. You take that risk. But our other friend, who's a microbiologist, would say that is exactly what nature does. It tries. We're going to try a flower over here. We're going to try a tree over here. We're going to try a flower with only 3 petals instead of the usual 5 petals. Will it work? I don't know. That's the way nature is always experimenting. Mm-hmm. So whether nature has an imagination, I don't know, but nature always gives it a go. And that imagination for us, I think, is a way of time travel. Mm-hmm. Because remember, the history is done. We don't live there anymore. And the future is not yet here. All we are in is this now. But our imagination allows us to go and travel through time.
Yes. In Through the Looking Glass, one of the things the White Queen talks about is a memory that goes backwards and forwards. And Alice says, you can't, how could that be? My memory only works in one direction. And the Queen was like, oh, that doesn't seem terribly useful, a memory that only goes one way. And Alice asked, well, what do you remember? She's like, I like to remember things from next week. And I think we have that ability to change the past in a way, through forgiveness, through telling a different story, through looking at history through a different lens, just as much as we have an ability to choose a future.
Back to the young person who cannot imagine a future that is worth living, and perhaps this person just hasn't seen enough of the life that is possible, all of the impossible things that you and I in our almost 60 years have experienced.
Yes. Well, yes, I think living through heartbreak, living through grief and loss, and discovering again and again, much like that you were talking about with the ethic of risk, that our song earlier, our anthem was Holly Near, I am willing, that I am open, I am willing. To be hopeless would seem so strange. So, lift me up to the light of change. That takes practice.
Yes.
Because as you experience it the first time, it is so crushing. The pain is so real. And it's by surviving it and then surviving it again and coming out and finding something new that's beautiful and another reason to continue, and then beginning to feel that painful past soften and come with you. The good pieces of the things I've lost, they're not gone. Not in my imagination, they're not gone. I can still hear my grandmother's voice. I have the tapes in my head, in my imagination, and her voice, and no doubt the voice of ancestors who were in her head. What I want to say to the young people and the old, whoever right now is living in that place of hopelessness and despair, that, hang on. It will change. Keep living. Keep dreaming and imagining those impossible things. How do you decide whether you should pick up your marker and take that risk, make that mark, put your name to it, or not? And that's where I feel like the teachings of my faith help me make. I go to church in part. I started going to church to be reminded of my best self week to week, and who I want, what I want that mark to look like, how I want to be remembered. In the Soul Matters packet for small groups, there's a spiritual exercise of imagining writing your epitaph. What mark do you want to have made on the world by having been here? How do you want people to remember you? What story of your life would make you feel like you're living had been worthwhile? That's a really that's a high set of standards to judge every imaginative undertaking. And I think sometimes, we do have to lose ourselves in the abundance of creation and sort of generating lots of ideas, the brainstorm. But then, you kind of have to clean up. And I hate this, but you have to eventually focus. Yeah, you do have to focus and choose. Will I do this thing or that thing? Am I going to go to graduate school and become a minister, for heaven's sake, at 50 years old? What a crazy idea. Am I going to preach a sermon in bed? Yes. Well, and this is where I feel like one of the things that we need as both inspiration and boundary for our imaginations is community. So that when we're in a place of despair, someone else can say, it's going to get better, wait for it. And when our imagination is eating us alive, we can just sit there to ground us to something outside of that story.
To bring you a cup of tea.
Bring you a cup of tea,
We are here to abet creation and to witness to it, to notice each other's beautiful face and complex nature so that creation need not play to an empty house.
Yes. And this is how we move back to our story, back to what mark will you make? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Our designation of a new year is somewhat arbitrary. Each day, each moment is a new beginning. And so I encourage you to practice imagining impossible things before breakfast and then discern which of those is worthy of your energy, your time, your talent, your efforts. Then pick up a marker or whatever best suits your way of making a mark on the world. Make your mark and sign it. Blessed be. Amen.